Hello and welcome back once again to the Wrestling Group. I'm your host Ryan, and today we are going to be taking a look at AEW Forbidden Door 2025. We're going to be doing a little preview and our predictions on this video, and there's quite a lot to get through. We have 4 kickoff show matches, the 0 hour, which is free on YouTube to watch. And then we have 9 main card matches, so 13 matches in total. And considering, to be fair to AEW, considering I did the video, 2 weeks ago, saying, Forbidden Doors in 2 weeks, and where the hell's New Japan? Well, New Japan showed up these last 2 weeks. Obviously, G1 was undergoing at the time, so it's no surprise that we didn't have some of the biggest names, but lo and behold, we even have the world champion on the show now. So, like I say, a lot to get through. So what we're going to do is we're going to kick in first for the pre-show and then roll into the main event. I am just pulling off online, so I'm just going to run the matches as they appear on my screen, rather than trying to work out what might be first and what might be last. As like I say, there's 13 matches altogether. So we'll start with the kickoff show, and it is Paragon, which is obviously Kyle O'Reilly and Roderick Strong. They are teaming with El Desperado. Absolutely love Despy. And Yuya Uemura versus Crew, which is obviously Action Andretti and Leo Rush, and the Don Callis family members of Hechicero and Josh Alexander. It's a hard one when it's a multi-man tag match in that, but with Hechicero going for the Ring of Honor World Championship next week, is it? Friday? Yeah, Friday coming up. He faces Bandido for the Ring of Honor World Championship. I'd expect Hechicero to pick up the victory for his team in this one. To be honest with you, though, there's no weak link in the good guys team. You got Kyle O'Reilly, Roderick Strong, Desperado, and Uemura. I can't see where the victory comes, but saying that, Hechicero is a good wrestler and he's technical. Shows Josh Alexander. The weak link for this match for me is Action Andretti. But no, I'm going to stick with it. I think the Don Callis family plus Crew pick up the victory in that match. So we move from the 8-man tag match to the 8-woman tag match on the pre-show, and we have the Triangle of Madness, which is Julia Hart, Sky Blue, and Tekla. And they are teaming with Megan Bayne, and they will take on Holly Cameron, Chris Statlander, Queen Aminata, and Willow Nightingale. So obviously we've got the ongoing story with Chris Statlander and Willow Nightingale. Will they team again? Won't they team again? So I feel like that's going to cost them the match here, and I think the Triangle of Madness and Megan Bayne are going to pick up the win. Again, it's another multi tag match, but it'll be a good match. Definitely be a good match. I really like the Triangle of Madness since they put them together. Still not 100% sold on the name, but I like Tekla. I think she's been great since she's come to AEW. Julia Hart's absolutely great. She's improving week on week, and Sky Blue looks the part. So there you go. Move on to match number 3, and it's a 6-man tag. Yeah, 6-man tag match. It is Jet Speed, which is obviously Kevin Knight and Speedball Mike Bailey. They are teaming with Michael Oku, who's probably my favourite Indies wrestler right now. I'd love nothing more than AEW to sign him off. They need to give us that AEW graphic before he ends up becoming a sports entertainer. That is not what I want to see for Michael Oku's future. And they are taking on the Gates of Agony and, of course, Ricochet. He's teamed with the Gates of Agony for over the last couple of months. They're building a bit of a faction going. They're up and down in the wins and losses category. Jet Speed's been fantastic as a tag team. Michael Oku's great. I'm going for the face team to pick up the victory. Michael Oku and Jet Speed to win. And then we move on to the 4th match of the kickoff show. So this is still on the kickoff show. We have the Ops, which is obviously Katsuyori Shibata, Powerhouse Hobbs, and Samoa Joe. They will take on Bullet Club War Dog members Clark Connors, Drilla Maloney, and Robbie X. And this is actually going to be for the AEW Trios Championship, so it's about time those belts are defended again. I'm glad they are, and I'm glad we're getting to see the War Dogs on the show as well. But I think the Ops retain here. They've only had one successful defense so far, and they've had the belts for a while. I can't see them dropping to this version of Bullet Club War Dogs. I mean, if Gabe Kidd was in there over Robbie X, then there's a good possibility, but obviously Gabe Kidd's involved in another match. So we'll move on now to the main card, and it is absolutely stacked full of matches. So much talent, so much to look at. Where do we start? So we'll start with Mercedes Moné versus Alex Windsor versus Persephone versus Bozilla. So I will admit, I don't really know much about Bozilla. I don't think I've actually seen a match of hers, and if I have, don't remember it. Persephone I've seen on the odd occasion. You know, she's had a history against some of the AEW talent before. She's faced Athena as well in a multi-women's match on Wrestle Kingdom kickoff shows last year, the year before. Alex Windsor, obviously, she has come in to AEW over the last couple of months, and she's been doing really well. And then, of course, Mercedes Moné, who has been absolutely killing it in AEW for the last 2 years that she's been there. I find it hard to be anything other than a Mercedes win, although this would be the perfect time to take the championship away from her. With it being a four-way, she doesn't have to be pinned. She's only been pinned once before, and that is to the AEW Women's Champion, which is obviously Toni Storm. I find it hard to back against Mercedes because she's won, she's now 9-time champion. She's held 9 different championships. Obviously, eventually, she's going to have to start losing them. I just find it hard to back against her, although Alex Windsor would be a great AEW TBS champion. You know, it pushed the division forward, and then it'd free up Mercedes to then enter into the AEW World, the Women's World Championship, which she's only challenged for once, but it would free her up to face, obviously, the winner of Toni Storm and Athena. I'm going to go with Mercedes. I can't go against that, although I do think Alex would be a great TBS champion. Then again, it's in the UK, and we need a good UK win. Now, do you know what? I'm changing it now. I'm changing it. Alex Windsor gets the win. I'm picking Alex Windsor. She's going to be the TBS champion. That's my pick. Alex Windsor for the TBS championship. And then we'll move on next to the AEW Tag Team Championships. We've got the Hurt Syndicate, which is obviously Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin, versus Brodito, which is Brody King and Bandito, and of course FTR. So with this one, you have obviously the Hurt Syndicate have been dominant champions. They've destroyed every team that's come their way. They've been fantastic. They've built the division back up again when it was lagging, especially under the likes of Private Party. It was proper lagging down near the bottom for me. And they've come back in. They've dominated in the tag team division as the champions. They've held the belts for a good while now. You've got Brodito, who's obviously been tag teaming over the past 2 months. Picked up some good victories, some really good matches. You've got Brody King, obviously phenomenal talent. Love him. I think it's time he is holding a championship in AEW. Yes, he's had the trios belts before, but I'd like to see him as a TNT champion, to be honest, or even the unified champion. I think, Brody is great. Obviously, it just seems to be time for Brody to be doing something while Buddy's still out injured. Obviously, Bandito's a great talent. They've seemed to gel really well together. The fans have got really behind it. And of course, FTR, which, let's face it, is one of the best tag teams in not just professional wrestling right now, but probably the history of professional wrestling, if we're being honest. FTR are a phenomenal team. And with that, I'm going to pick FTR to pick up the victory. I think Brodito are going to eat the pin, keeps the Hurt Syndicate strong, puts the titles on FTR, when they end up going against Adam Copeland and Christian Cage, because I think that's where it's going. It's going to be an AEW tag team titles match between FTR, Adam Copeland and Christian Cage in the near future. So FTR pick up the victory and the tag team titles. So with that, you know what, we're going to go straight to the next tag match, and that is Adam Copeland, Christian Cage versus Killswitch and Kip Sabian. Obviously, the original tag team was going to be against Nick Wayne, who seems to have picked up an injury. He said he's broke his foot. I don't think there's been a confirmation that I've seen on that if it is actually a broken foot, but you know, that's what he says is the issue. He's out the match, which I'm gutted for, because do you know what, I thought this was always going to end up being Adam Copeland, Christian Cage versus Killswitch and Nick Wayne. It's great that Killswitch is back. You know, at one point thought we'd never see him in a ring again. I love Killswitch. I think he's great. He's something different. You know, no one else has that character in wrestling on TV. But he's not like a goofy character with it. He's still strong, aggressive, powerful. Kip Sabian, you know what? I can't remember last time we seen Kip on a pay-per-view in a match. So I'm more than happy for them to get a match here. But let's face it, it's going to be Cope and Christian get the win. And Kip Sabian's going to eat the pin. And like I say, then that'll push them to go against who I'm picking, obviously, to win the AEW tag belts in FTR, probably at All Out. So we'll move on next to Kazuchika Okada versus Swerve Strickland for the AEW Unified Championship. This is one of their matches which could go either way. You know, Kazuchika Okada obviously just beat Kenny Omega to unify the championships and make it one whole. You got Swerve Strickland, who's basically like an uncrowned world champion. You know, he has some of the best matches in not just the history of, not just recently, but also the history of AEW. You know, he's had some phenomenal battles, some great matches. I'm really, really excited to see Kazuchika Okada face Swerve Strickland for the championship. I just struggle on picking who wins. On one hand, Kazuchika Okada, like I say, he's only just unified the titles. Pretty sure he hasn't lost still yet in the singles match in AEW. And then you've got Swerve Strickland, like I say, he basically wrestles at a world championship level. They do want to push the unified championship up to be somewhat of a level 2, the world title, so it would make sense for Swerve to pick up the victory. Although Fightful Select were reporting this week, yes, he's had an injury for a long time now, but it's coming to a point where he needs to look at that injury and get it sorted, maybe surgery. So with having found that news out this week, I'm going to back Kazuchika Okada for the victory and retain of the titles. Maybe even a beatdown of Swerve after the match if he has got to take that time off to get himself looked at. So we move on from that match and we go to Kyle Fletcher versus Hiromu Takahashi. A match I'm really excited to see. I love Kyle Fletcher. He's been one of the fastest rising stars in AEW's history. You know, he's come in, obviously, as a tag team champion as part of Aussie Open. He then, when Mark Davis got injured, pushed out on his own. He started to build his physique up quite a bit, very impressively. Became Ring of Honor television champion. Started having absolutely phenomenal matches there, and then just pushed on and on and on. And you know, he's faced Will Ospreay, he's faced Kenny Omega, and he's looked $1,000. He's also newly crowned AEW TNT champion, facing Hiromu Takahashi, probably the greatest ever junior heavyweight champion in New Japan history. Takahashi brings it every time. I love watching Hiromu wrestle. He's had some of my favourite matches in New Japan. I just can't wait for this match. I think it's going to be fast-paced and brutal. But ultimately, Kyle Fletcher picks up the victory. We retain this title, keeping it obviously in AEW, and of course, continuing to push on towards the World Championship, which I think he gets his hands on next year. So we'll move on from that match, and we will then look at Timeless Toni Storm versus Athena for the AEW Women's Championship. Now, this is Athena's Casino Gauntlet Championship contract match. She's effectively cashing it in to face Tony Storm is the AEW Women's Championship. You know, obviously Athena is the Ring of Honor Women's Champion. She's the forever champion. She's coming up on 1,000 days as Ring of Honor World Champion. She's been fantastic since coming to AEW / Ring of Honor. You know, she hasn't spent a hell of a lot of time on the AEW TV, but if you're a fan of hers, like what I am, you will follow her work. She's been having some absolutely phenomenal matches over in Ring of Honor. She's been doing great stuff there. She's built herself back up. And to me, is probably the best women's wrestler in the world right now. And then you've got Tony Storm, whose character, you know, there's no one else's character that is well and is successful as what Tony Storm's has been over the last year, 2 years that she's been doing the character of the Timeless. You know, it's unreal to see where she was to what she's now gone to become. Having said that, it's another one that could go 50-50. You know, they could keep the belt on Tony. But one, for people to want to use the Casino Gauntlet in the future and want to win it, I feel like one of them has to be successful in cashing in the contract. And of course, like I say, we need to start building that women's division back up. You know, they've got a really strong division, but Tony has been at the top of it for a long, long time now. They didn't pull the trigger with Mercedes. So who could they pull the trigger with? If they don't do it with Athena, could it be Mercedes again if she does lose the TBS Championship? Or if Athena does beat Tony Storm, could we then see Mercedes versus Athena in the future for the AEW Women's Championship? But for me, I'm going to pick Athena. Normally, I do pick Athena, so it shouldn't be a shock, but I do feel like Athena now needs to be the face of the AEW Women's division. So that leaves us with only a couple of matches left. We're looking at next the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship, and we're looking at Zack Sabre Jr. He's probably the best technical wrestler in the world right now. And I say right now because Danielson's semi-retired or is retired. We're not 100% sure there. Obviously, Danielson is the greatest of all time. And he's facing Nigel McGuinness, an absolute legend in the world of wrestling, especially in the British wrestling scene. You know, I've really enjoyed them being able to get Nigel back into the ring on the odd occasion. You know, he's not in the ring too much. He's not using up too much of that time. His matches always feel special because they only bring him back every so often. You know, the original bringing him back in the multi-man match, then to bring him back against Danielson, which made sense because they built to it for so long. Then obviously him facing off against Lee Moriarty for the Ring of Honor Pure Championship, someone who he'd helped train, and now getting a shot at Zack Sabre Jr. in what I deem as the biggest dream match on this card. I would love nothing, absolutely nothing more than Nigel McGuinness to become the IWGP World Heavyweight Champion, but I think there's literally probably 0.1% chance of that happening. Zack Sabre Jr. is obviously going to pick up the victory and keep the title. It's just what to do with Daniel Garcia. Oh, for me, Daniel Garcia, since becoming the TNT champion, you know, he had decent matches. His character was sort of up and down. They're not really sure what to do with him right now. You know, he didn't win back the TNT title. He obviously still seems to be floating around that division. I don't know, he's just gone a bit flat and a bit stale. So I feel the reason why they've done this is so when Nigel is facing Zack Sabre Jr. for the title, Daniel Garcia will either cost him the match, cost him the title, or he will turn on him afterwards. I feel like Daniel Garcia becomes a heel tonight at Forbidden Door. But yeah, Zack Sabre Jr. to pick up the victory and retain the IWGP World Championship. So that leaves us with just 2 matches left, and we will look next at the AEW World Heavyweight Championship. It's Hangman Page versus MJF for the AEW World Championship. Now, originally this was supposed to be MJF's cash-in. 2 weeks ago, he said he was going to use his Casino Gauntlet Championship contract match. Then last week, he tried to set fire to Mark Briscoe, as you do. And of course, got out of using his contract, so he still has that in the bag. We've also got stipulation if Hangman Page is counted out or disqualified, he will in fact drop the title, which obviously normally doesn't happen. Normally the champion has the advantage, so he's basically stripped any advantage back from Hangman that he'd normally have being the champion going into the match. I find it interesting that they're now not using the contract. My original idea was always they haven't specified that they need to announce ahead of time, so could it in fact be like the Money in the Bank? Could it be like what Christian Cage's was, where basically you could come out at any time and effectively use it? Therefore, if Hangman Page beats MJF, could MJF then attack Hangman, sign his contract, and then have a rematch literally there and then beat him for the title? So I find it very interesting that hasn't been used. Although I do struggle to think that they're going to do that with how long Mox had the title. So Mox had the title, what was it, 8-9 months? And then they built and built and built up to obviously getting us Hangman Page back as being the hero to take the belt from Jon Moxley. And I'd be very, very surprised if that was all undone. Like, pretty much at his next title defense. Obviously, he successfully defended it in the rematch against Moxley. But in the first new challenger for him to drop the belt. Although if he did obviously retain the title originally first, then it counts as 2 successful title defenses, and then losing it in the casino and gauntlet match afterwards. I mean, that is... I'm sort of leaning towards that's what they might do. It also depends on the card where this comes. Is this going to main event and close the show, or will it be the steel cage match? I think the steel cage match closes out the show, so I very much doubt there's going to be shenanigans the second match towards the end where MJF loses and then officially wins, obviously, the world title. So I'm probably going to say Hangman picks up the victory and retains the title. I don't know whether MJF is then going to do anything with the casino or whether he'll save it maybe for the next pay-per-view. But giving someone like MJF an opportunity like that, it'd be silly if they just did it as a normal match. So then we'll move on to the very last match, and it's the lights out steel cage match, and it's 5-on-5. So for me, it makes me wonder, are they going to do double rings? Something's got to give, because 10 guys can't go in such a small ring with cages to the side. So is it going to be like a Hell in a Cell style cage with just no roof, but it's further away, so you've got the space outside the ring, so effectively people could stand on the ring apron. They've not actually told us what it's going to look like, but of course we have the Golden Lovers, which is Kenny Omega and Kota Ibushi, Darby Allin, Hiroshi Tanahashi, having his last ever match in the UK as he's on his retirement tour, and Will Ospreay, who's having his last match for a while by the look of it, as he's going to be taking time off to get neck surgery. Now he'll take on the Death Riders of Jon Moxley, Claudio Castagnoli, the Young Bucks, which is obviously Matt and Nick, or Rod and Todd if you watched Collision last night, and of course Gabe Kidd from New Japan Pro Wrestling. He's been flirting with Death Riders. And, we've got the Death Riders and we've got Bullet Club War Dogs, but they are quite similar in how aggressive and how they fight. So it's interesting. It always interests me when Gabe mixes it up with the Death Riders. Could we see Gabe Kidd officially join Death Riders properly? Could Gabe Kidd take over the War Dogs and then officially align both Death Riders and War Dogs together? Who knows? For me, it's a hard one, this. I don't feel like either team loses anything if they don't win the match. Obviously, you got Kenny Omega and Kota Ibushi. For me now, it's at the point where, because Kenny lost the International Championship, then Kenny and Kota need to just continue as a tag team and go for the AEW tag team titles at some point. I'd love to see them as AEW tag team champions. The Golden Lovers, I think, have only been one-time tag champs before. I'm sure that was in DDT, so it was forever ago. You got Darby Allin, who ultimately I think is going to face Jon Moxley in the future. Maybe All Out. And then you got obviously Tanahashi in his last ever match in the UK, and of course Will Ospreay, who's going to be off for a while to have neck surgery. And then you're facing against, obviously, two of the most brutal competitors in AEW, and Jon Moxley and Claudio Castagnoli. Again, another two that I'd like to see more as a tag team if they're not having Jon Moxley in the world title scene. Maybe have him as a tag team with Claudio. I mean, could you imagine the tag division if you add both the Golden Lovers and the Death Riders in? Just ultimately it picks up, doesn't it? You've also got Young Bucks, one of the greatest tag teams in the history of pro wrestling, and of course the unpredictable Gabe Kidd, who is the IWGP Global Champion. I think it's a hard one to pick, this one. I'm probably just going to edge it to the faces, as I think that Darby, his team, gets the victory, and then Jon Moxley wants the singles match against Darby. I feel like that's how they get from this to All Out of Darby versus Jon, is if Darby's team wins. Maybe Darby pins Jon, or Darby pins Claudio. Maybe that's why. But there you have it. That is my full predictions. It's a long video, this one, but it's a long pay-per-view. It's going to start at 4:30 in the UK. Because that's when the kickoff starts. So 4:30 till 6 is the kickoff show, which has got 4 matches on, so it's going to be stacked. And then we move on to the main card at 6 o'clock, and it's probably going to run for 4 hours, maybe a bit longer. So we could be 10 or just after 10 o'clock before AEW Forbidden Door ends. And because obviously I'm a football fan, I'll be watching the football first, so I'll be going football straight into the kickoff show and into the main card. So it's going to be a lot of bum on chair today and a lot of telly watching. So I'm quite looking forward to it. I'm really, really looking forward to AEW Forbidden Door. I think it's going to be a phenomenal pay-per-view. And as always, if you're still with me, I know it's a long video, but if you're still with me, obviously give me your predictions in the comment section below. And as always, don't forget to like, drop us a comment, and of course, don't forget to subscribe to the wrestling group today.